All right, these are my baby palettes, my little palettes, my minis, if you will, but some of them, I mean, are 9 pans. So they're just small palettes that fit in here better than they kind of get lost in the other shelving for my palettes. So this is where they're at. I thought I would start here and then we'll move into the main palette collection, the large palette collection. So let's start here. These are my two Marc Jacobs palettes. This is Electric and Flamboyant. And you know, truth be told, I really do like these palettes. You can see that there's been, you know, quite a bit of usage on this one in terms of the shimmers. They are just kind of explosive shimmers. They just kind of go everywhere. I don't think that the formula on these has changed at all. I think that they're really, really beautiful. I think I'm going to hold on to them. If I was to get rid of one, it would probably be this one, which is the Flamboyant, but I mean, because it is mostly shimmers. There are 5 shimmers in here, 2 mattes. But I do like both of these palettes, so I am going to hold on to them. I do think I am going to get rid of this. This is the KVD Shade and Light Rust palette, and it's just like, I don't need it. There's no reason to have it in my collection. Yeah, it's beautiful, but I really just don't need it, and I don't see myself pulling for this little guy before I pull for like a Natasha Denona one or something like that. I do think I'm going to declutter this palette. This Midas Cosmetics, this is not even a brand anymore, and I have held on to this for so long, and you know, truth be told, I really do like the palette, and I really do think that these shades are beautiful, and they just are so much more vibrant than some shades that are similar to them in my collection. I mean, look at that yellow. Yeah, I'm going to hold on to this. This is a beautiful shimmer as well, but I'm not looking forward to getting glitter all over myself right now. So if I swatch, we're going to be here for 500 years. So I'm not going to swatch. Nabla Cutie Palettes. I do have the Platinum, which looks like this, which I do love so dang much. I do think I'm going to hold on to this. The blue one, oh, you know, the problem is this shade here, I like 4 out of the 6 shades in here, so I continue to hold on to it. I'm going to hold on to it too. So Platinum and Midnight I have, we'll hold on to. Wayne Goss. I really do like the formula he has for his palette, so I will hold on to this one, but I will probably not purchase a Wayne Goss palette ever again. He just doesn't have color stories that interest me a whole lot, so I will continue to hold on to that. And here we are. I have glitter all over me. Anyways, I think that just opening these palettes lends to glitter all over you. Milk Cosmetics Zodiac Earth, I will be holding on to. Virgo is an earth sign. I am a Virgo, so I will be holding on to this for that reason, if for no other reason, which I know is silly. I know it's silly, but I'm going to do me, you do you. This is the Colored Rain Berry Cute palette, and this is what it looks like, and I do think that I can probably let this go. I kept it in my palette collection for a long time because I really do like this color, and I really do think that this purple berry color is really beautiful. It's a kind of like a really pretty like gray toned purple, like so pretty. And this is a beautiful platinum. I don't think of it as a purple palette in my collection. I also wouldn't pull for it, I don't think, over other purple palettes in my collection. So we're gonna get rid of that one. NARS Summer Unrated isn't going anywhere, even though this is just kind of a basic palette. I don't see any reason to get rid of this, and honestly, when we're going through the palettes, I'm probably not going to be super cutthroat with the palette. I think I forgot to tell you, I did start with 214. I'm probably not going to be super cutthroat with these palettes because I have curated these down to like what I really do enjoy to have in my collection. But there are some that I'll be, you know, decluttering. All right, these two are Viseart Petite Pro, and these two are my large Viseart palettes. If I was to get rid of any one of these, it would be this one. This is the Viseart Sultry Muse palette. This is all of their like shimmers, and when I say it like that, it's because they're really more of a satin formula, their shimmers. I'm not a big fan, to be honest, but I do like these for like just really everyday kind of one and done like eyeshadow looks. And I think I want to hold on to this just cuz. And in addition to that, I do think that these pans come out of here, so I'll hold on to them for like my build your own palettes as well. Maybe one day I will get rid of some of those and just put the rest into my single palette section, but this is not the day. This one is the Dark Mattes. I love this palette, so this will go nowhere. These have been in my collection for so long, but they still perform top notch. And then this is the Petite Pro Deux, which, I mean, isn't 100% fantastic, but it's also not bad. It's a decent like purple pinky color story. It's got a nice brown. It goes really light to really deep. It's got a good array of shimmers that go with either any of the shades in here. It's a good two and done eye look. Like, I really like this palette, so I will hold on to it. This one is Soleil, and it is the Crazy Pops of Color. I don't really 100% love this purple, but I do like all the other shades in this palette. It's really beautiful. It goes really light to really deep. It's a good palette, so I'll hold on to this as well. I am not getting rid of any of my Lime Crime palettes. This Chroma palette is one of my favorites, honestly, just because the color story is just so unique. This is a beautiful shimmer here. I know that you guys can't 100% tell, but it's this really beautiful, like, green to like turquoise duochrome. It's so pretty. This purple is beautiful. This teal is beautiful. Yeah, I will hold on to this one. This Venus 3, if I was to get rid of one, it would be this one. But I do like it. I like this color here. It just wasn't my favorite of the three. And then this is the Immortalis, and that is just such a beautiful, like, basic gothy color story, so I have to hold on to that. Complex Culture. This is the Full-Time Eyeshadow palette, and it looks like this, just a basic palette, but I do love the formula of this, so I will be holding on to it. We have Dinner Party, Cocktail Party, Surprise Party. So all three of these rows are supposed to make a look for you. I really did find that this has a beautiful formula, and I got this in like an Ipsy, and I wasn't even going to use it, but it surprised me. So I'm glad to have it in my collection. And then this is the Danessa Myricks Like Work Volume 3 Experience palette, and you would have to pry this out of my cold dead hands. This is absolutely not going anywhere. Really beautiful multi-chromes in here. It's absolutely not going anywhere. This is the Pat McGrath Bijou Brilliance palette. I really love this palette. I really hate it for the fact that there's only one matte in this palette, which is this one here, but the rest of them are so pretty. I think this is probably the worst shade in the palette, but all of them are just really truly stunning. So I will hold on to it. These are all of my Natasha Denona like 5-pan full size and 5-pan minis. I do have some in my drawer of shame as well, but these are the ones that I have used. So this is the Natasha Denona Mini Biba. You guys should know these are not going anywhere. This is the Mini Rose. Really beautiful palette. This one is the Mini Retro. Besides Mini Xenon, probably my favorite of the palettes. This one is Mini Sunset. I don't know why I'm looking at the back. I know what these are named. And then Mini Xenon, my favorite 5-pan palette. And then these are 5-pan full size. I got these in Ipsy. This is or BoxyCharm, one or the other. This is the Peak palette. And I do believe that these are full of like already existing shades in other palettes. So this is Peak and this is Ayana. If I got rid of any, I could get rid of these because these have already existing shades in other palettes, but I hold on to them because they're really good in a pinch and to take with me on the road, and I don't have to like build my own palette to get them there. These, we all know that some of these are going because I was not a fan of these. This is the Feel My Vibe palette. These are Ribbon handbag palettes. This one is the Unnatural palette. And this one is the Paradise Lost. And I am going to declutter this one. I'm also going to declutter this one. I think that this one would stay if this blue was not such a disappointment and this purple was not such a disappointment. Because these two shadows are beautiful, but like I can pull them in from other palettes. I am going to keep this one because I really did like every single shadow in this palette. We'll hold on to that one. These two are not going anywhere. These are the El Maquillage palettes. These are the Color Boss Squad quads. This one is the Real Deal, which is just Quarterly Color Story. Really pretty. And then this one is called Make Moves, and it is a purple pinky color story. Also really pretty, and their formula is spot on. It's a really great formula, but their palettes are kind of expensive. Surprisingly, I'm going to keep this. This is the Revolution Beauty Ultimate Nudes palette. I think that this was supposed to be like a dupe for a Huda Beauty Nudes palette, one of her Obsession palettes. I really do like this. It kind of shocked me. I got it in gratis. I'm not really a fan of anything Revolution, but I did like this, so I will hold on to it. Just a really easy palette to use. Norvina. We have Pro Pigment Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 in her minis. I'm going to hold on to Volume 1 because Volume 1 is beautiful. I have some of my favorite shadows are in these palettes, so it makes it really hard. I really love these two shades, but like as a whole, this palette doesn't wholeheartedly speak to me. And then this one, I really like these two shades. This one I'm not fond of because this one is a pressed glitter. I'm gonna keep them all for now. Yep, I'm gonna keep them all for now because I can. These are the Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes that I have left in my collection, and I have gotten rid of so many Obsessions palettes over the years. So I have Love Fest, which if I'm honest with you, I don't 100% love, but I do love these three shades here. But like all of these, I could easily get out of the Coral palette, right? And I love the Coral palette, and the Coral palette still performs really, really beautifully. These are so hard. We have the Wild palette, and I think that the Wild palette looks like a combination of the Sapphire and the Emerald palette. And then we have the Ruby. So I think I'm going to hold on to Ruby because I don't have, you know, these two kind of look alike and these three look alike. Oh God. I'm gonna keep them. I might keep all of them. If I was to get rid of one of them, it would probably be the Emerald palette, but I don't feel like I need to right now, so I'm gonna keep them all. We have Baroque, which is one of the only ColourPop palettes that I have in my collection. I truly do love it. We have Sugar Pill Fun Size, which I love using this to like blend out any of my like crazy colored eye looks. I have the Morphe Disney and Friends, Mickey and Friends mini artistry palette. That's all it says, but it is a Disney palette. I think I can declutter this. And I have the Petal Passion by Morphe. This I got in gratis. I actually like it quite a lot. This shadow here is a little bit different. It's kind of like a super shock. It's very, very messy. As you guys can see, it's kind of all over the place. But it is truly beautiful, and this is a beautiful palette. I really had a good time with this palette. We have Hip Dot. This is the Witchy Worms palette. I could very easily declutter this and not probably feel any sort of way about it, but I do think I'm going to hold on to it for a little bit longer, just because, I mean, it's a beautiful formula. I had a good time with this palette. Every eye look I produced with this palette looked really pretty beautiful, even though it was really very basic. So I am going to hold on to this, I think. My Tarte Make Believe in Yourself palette. You guys, if I got rid of this, this would be every pan of eyeshadow I have in my collection. I'm just kidding, but also kind of not. I think I've got 5 pans of eyeshadow in my collection, and these are 3 of them. So there's that. I use this in an all year. I had it in my project pan all year before last. That's how I got the pans and got as much usage out of this palette as I did. And then I also have pulled it into deca panning 100,000 times. I really think that this palette performs really super well, and I don't think at this point that there's really any reason to get rid of it. So I'm gonna hold on to it. This is the Pat McGrath Blitz Astral Quad and Ritualistic Rose. This is just such a beautiful quad, and I can't see myself getting rid of this anytime soon. It's just a quad of, I mean, it's kind of a boring quad when you look at it. It's not got any special shades or anything like that, but it is really pretty, so I'm going to hold on to it. And then these are my 2 like quints from Pat McGrath from way back in the day when she did this. And this one is in Subversive, right? Eye Ecstasy Quad in Subversive. And this one is in Sublime, and I will be holding on to both of those as well. So in the little tiny, like, tiny palette section, I mean, we did get rid of some. I got rid of 5, which I think is more than I expected I was going to get rid of. I do think that I could probably get rid of more, but that more would come from the, I do think I'm going to get rid of the Emerald Obsessions palette. I just think that there's a lot more overlap with this palette than there is with any of the other ones, and I just don't need this. I just don't need it. So I will get rid of that one. So we got rid of 6 in the little tiny palette collection, and I think that that's fine. It honestly feels a little weird to me to have all this space here, because I feel like my palettes are gonna like fall over, and I don't love that, but that's okay. It's okay. So this is where we're at. This might change a little bit because I have, I think, 3 more Natasha Denona minis in my drawer of shame, and those are obviously not going to fit in this little tiny space here unless I scooch these over. Who knows? We'll see, but note that this is what it looks like right now, and it may change. Let's move on to big palettes. This is my palette collection, and what you guys are seeing here are the main sections of my palette collection. I didn't want to lay them all out. You guys, I have way too many. This right here is where I put all of the new things coming into my collection. It is empty. It is empty because I am on a no-buy this year. Why I'm so savagely decluttering my collection when I'm on a no-buy, I have no idea. But that's where we are. So let's walk through these palettes. I have them all like situated by brand. I have Pat McGrath and Danessa Myricks, and in here I have like Melt and Violet Voss and Blend Bunny. ABH is down here in Huda. These are all Natasha Denona. This is Too Faced and Urban Decay and Lunar Beauty. And I think there's a Rando Lorac and Rando KVD in there. All of the bottom, for the most part, is like my indie stuff. I shouldn't say that's all of my indie, right? Because Lunar Beauty is indie, Natasha Denona is indie, Melt is kind of indie. So, I mean, it is what it is, but these are all of my palettes. So, now that you've seen it like this, I'm going to face towards the ground, and we're going to go through these palettes. We have the Danessa Myricks Groundwork Blooming Romance palette. This actually is a really great palette for, I mean, just an everyday matte eye look. This is also a great full face palette. I love this palette so dang much. It's beautiful. Each pan is half, well, 3/4 cream, 1/4 powder, and it's 2 separate pans, and you can take these out of here and create your own palette with them and only take what you want. I love this palette, and I did end up purchasing the regular Groundwork palette in this because I liked this one so much. None of these are going. Just preface that. This is the Lightwork Volume 4 Transcendence palette. This one is really such a beautiful palette. Really beautiful multi-chromes in here. The one thing that I would say about this palette is these 4 shadows in here are kind of a pain in the ass, but it truly is a beautiful palette. Wow, these are so hard to show you. I think I need to turn them to the side like this. Like I said, these 4 in the center, kind of pains in the ass, but I will hold on to them. All of these palettes I have done a palette roulette on. I will link the playlist for you guys so that you can go and watch them. I have swatches of every single one of these palettes in that playlist for the videos that I do, the reviews on these palettes. Every single one of them are swatched. So this is the Lightwork Volume 5, the I Am palette, and this one is the one that has the like affirmations on it. This one is such a beautiful palette as well. I really, really love this palette, and this one doesn't have any pain in the ass palette or any pain in the ass pans in it. Some of them are a little bit more flaky than others, but they're truly beautiful. So both of these palettes came to me in a lucky bag, so I felt really lucky to get them in that way. Pat McGrath. For her big 10 pen palettes, I have 2, 5, 6, 9, and 10. I don't pick up every single one of her palettes. I just don't find that they are like honestly worth it to me, so there's that. This one is 2, which is Sublime, and I purchased this one for that green, and that green is gorgeous. This is actually a really beautiful palette. I really love this palette, and this is the first one that I picked up from Pat McGrath ever, and it was because of that green. You know, sometimes we do silly things like that. This one is number 5, Bronze Seduction. I was late to the game on this one. I didn't really see the hype around it, but then picked it up, started using it, and it actually is rather pretty. This shade right here is stunning. And the red is more of like an orange red, which I'm not 100% fond of. I would rather it be a red red, but it is beautiful as it pertains to this palette. Then we have Midnight Sun. Again, another one I was late to the game on. This is number 6. So pretty. I think when I first saw this, I was like, that's too cool tone for me, but listen, this shade right here, stunning. This shade, probably one of my favorite, like, metallic-y greens in my collection. Yeah, I really love this palette. And every eye look that I've done with this palette has just been phenomenal. Now, every single one of these palettes, except for that first one, Sublime, like I was dumb and I got rid of the card that has all the shade names in it. So all the rest of them do have their shade names in them. That's one thing that I don't love about Pat McGrath palettes, is that she doesn't put the shade names anywhere except for on that insert. This is number 9, Utopian Dreams. This is one of the only Pat McGrath palettes besides Sublime that as soon as it like was launching, I was like, I have to have this palette. This palette is stunning. This shade here, so pretty. It's like this periwinkle blue to green to like purple. Oh, so pretty. This one is one of those like pinks to golds, not really unique, but also still beautiful and flaky, like all of Pat McGrath's like special shades are. This is a truly beautiful palette. Really happy to have it in my collection. This is Moonlit Seduction. This is another one I was late to the game on, and I think it's just because it is, again, one of those ones that I was like, too cool tone for me. But, oh god, this is so pretty. This shade here, gorgeous. I really loved every single look I got out of this palette, so I'm really happy to have it in my collection. Now, for the most part, Pat McGrath does not like inspire me, so I feel like most of her palettes are the exact same, and they kind of are. These are the 5 that I want to own, so I will continue to own them. This one is the first holiday palette that she did, the Mothership Mega Celestial Divinity palette. And way back then, I only had the one palette from Pat McGrath, and it was like a shocker to me that this was being sold for like 78 bucks, right? So I ended up picking it up because, I mean, it is truly stunning. The one thing that I hate about this palette is there are literally only 3 mattes, and the rest of them are shimmers, and they're just like basic shimmers. There's a couple of duochromes in here, but nothing special about this palette, but it's 90% shimmers, which isn't my sweet spot for palettes. We all know this, but this truly does have some really beautiful shades in it, so I hold on to it because these mattes do go with every single shimmer in this palette, and it is a truly beautiful palette. I remember hearing when this first came out that the 6 pans, each section of this came from a different palette of hers. I'm not sure which, because I don't own any of her 6-pan palettes, which I'm happy about because if these all came from a different 6-pan palette that she had in her collection at one point in time, I'm really glad that I don't own any of them. Pat McGrath, however, is really, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but she does like reuse shades often. So there are several palettes in her collection that have the same shades as other palettes in her collection is where I'm trying to go with this. That is my Pat McGrath and Dinesh Myrex collection. None of those are going anywhere. I'm gonna go pull the next set. I have a bunch sitting in front of me. Like, you guys, this is probably gonna be more of a collection video than it is a declutter video, if I'm honest with you. There are some that I can see myself getting rid of, but for the most part, my palettes are my babies. In this section, we have my Huda, Sydney Grace, Violet Voss, my single solitary Patrick Ta palette, my Blend Bunny Cosmetics, and all of my Melt palettes. So Huda, listen, last year in Declutter I did get rid of a couple of Huda. This year I will not be doing that. This is the new nude. This used to be my favorite for a very long time. I do not love that Huda puts glitters in her palette, and if there was one that I could get rid of, it might be this one because of those glitters, but I do love this palette, so it's not going anywhere. Rose Quartz is also not going anywhere. I love that this has some of those like really great like innovative formulas in it without having the pressed glitters. Really beautiful palette, also not getting rid of it. One thing that I will say about this one too is I recently did a video and I poked my finger into this one here, which is a gel, and surprisingly enough, this doesn't have a clasp on it anymore. It came to me broken. It doesn't shut tightly, but that gel is still 100% performing. So, I mean, it takes a minute, but it's still 100% performing. This is the Huda Pretty Grunge. I love this palette. This is such a beautiful cool toned color story. Dark and grungy while also being light and airy. So I really do love this. It leans a little bit pink. Huda leans a little bit pink in all of her palettes. So there's that. And then Huda Mercury Retrograde. You know, funny story about this one. I think that you guys maybe have heard this before. This wasn't even a palette I was going to pick up. One of you guys actually inspired me to get it, and this is quite possibly one of my favorite Hudas just because of the colors in this. It does have some really, really glittery shades, but they're not like pressed glitters, right? We'll continue to hold on to my 4 Huda Beauty large palettes. This is Patrick Ta Major Dimension 3. This is the all matte eyeshadow palette. It's nothing spectacular, if I'm honest with you. I didn't have a horrible time with it, but also didn't have a great time with it. But I'm going to keep it in my collection for the sheer fact that it is all matte. I don't have very many palettes that are an all matte palette. And it's my only Patrick Ta. Sydney Grace, let's do those first. Tiny Marvels will never go anywhere. If at some point I deem it a palette that I can't have anymore in my collection for whatever reason or not, it'll go into a memories drawer. This is Sydney Grace's collaboration with Mel Thompson, who, rest her soul, is no longer with us, but was such a breath of fresh air in the beauty community. So I will hold on to this, and it has, of course, the wonderful Sydney Grace formula to every single one of these. And there's only one shadow in this palette that existed in their collection prior to Mel doing this with them. This is just a magnetic palette that I put the In Mel's Memory palette singles into. And I purchased this to try alongside of the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette, which I did not like as much as I liked this. So these will stay. And then this actually was a surprise to me. This is Love's Journey. I got this as a free gift with purchase with not last year's Christmas in July sale, but the year before's Christmas in July sale. And I waited for like almost a year to try this palette, and every single shade in this palette is gorgeous. I loved every single minute with this palette. I also love that of this 15 pan eyeshadow palette, 9 of these pans are matte and only 6 are shimmers. So you get just a really great eye look going straight across. You can see there's warm, neutral, and cool. You can go straight across and get 3 separate eye looks with this, dabble around in it and get multiple different eye looks with this. It's just a really great staple palette, so I will hold on to this one as well. Violet Voss is hard for me because I really love the Violet Voss formula, but they're not really necessarily a brand that is like big on the market anymore. They used to be, and I fell in love with them. And these are the 3 that I kept. I used to have some of their mini palettes as well, but I did declutter all the mini palettes that I had. This is the Flamingo palette. This one I got at a time when I couldn't afford Natasha Denona, and she had just come out with the Tropics palette, and I think this was meant to be like a dupe-ish to the Tropics palette, and I fell in love with this palette. I will keep this palette because it's got some, I think interesting and also unique colors to my palette collection. This is the Violet Voss Like a Boss, and I have really great memories with this palette because I made a friend very early on in my YouTube career. Her name was Lisa, and we did a collab with this palette, so it's special to me for that reason. I wouldn't say any of these are like special in my collection like they would be with the Flamingo palette, but these are really beautiful shades. This is a really pretty like red, brown, green kind of like duochrome color. The rest of them are just like regular shadows. I do like that it goes really dark, really light, has mostly mattes in it. I really do like this palette, and we'll hold on to it. And then the Holy Grail palette. If there was one of the Violet Voss palettes that I could get rid of, it would be this one. I think that you guys can see that it is used the least of the 3 palettes, but it's also just such a beautiful color story and such a beautiful palette. I can't see me getting rid of this because these are, these reds down here, these cranberries are so, so pretty, and the oranges up here are also so, so pretty and really colors that I like to use on my eyes, so this will also stay. Blend Bunny. These are not going anywhere. This is the Dollhouse palette. I love Blend Bunny for a couple of reasons. Number one, their mattes are phenomenal. I think that their shimmers could use some work, but I also love that, you know, if you go up and down a row, I know that they've been jumbling them around a lot lately, but if you go down a row in any of their palettes, you can get a look. The one thing that I like about this palette is it has shimmers down here and shimmers up here. It is a relatively large palette for in terms of how many shadows are in here, but it is rather like thin and nice and compact. So I really like the Dollhouse palette, but of the 3 Blend Bunny I have, if I was going to get rid of one, it would be that one, but I'm not. This is the Lure palette, my favorite Blend Bunny palette. And if you don't know why, I don't know why we're friends. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Such a beautiful palette. I love the colors in this palette. Then we have Surge. Surge is different because it has all of these, you know, neons in it. I would say though that those neons aren't what makes this palette phenomenal, because those neons actually are not the best neons. This palette was discontinued because of the neons though. They can't get the pigments that they need for those neons anymore for whatever reason. I can't remember what it is, but each one of these rows is just such a spectacular eye look, and then adding those neons in there actually gives it a little bit more uniqueness to the palette. And I really do firmly believe this is the only palette that I have that has neons in it. I would hold on to it for that reason. It's just such a beautiful palette. Let's talk about Melt. You guys will see that I have, you know, brands that are favorites to me. Melt is one of those brands. None of these palettes is going. I have Smoke Sessions 1 and 2. Oops. Smoke Sessions 1 is the green one, and Smoke Sessions 2 is the purple one. I love the purple more than I love the green, if I'm honest with you, but both of these are so beautiful and unique, and there's nothing wrong with my Smoke Sessions 1, and I know that a lot of people had issues with their Smoke Sessions 1. I have not had that problem. None of my shades are puffy or seeing mold or anything like that, so I will hold on to them until I cannot use them ever anymore. 420 is a palette that I have a really hard time with because it's got the palette is made of that, what is this called? Lenticular? I do this every single time. Cover, and it's gross to me. I can't hardly hold on to it, but it moves, which I think is very cool. Yeah, it moves. Just such a really beautiful like fall tone color story. I love it, and I mean, I think it like goes from summer to fall. It's beautiful. I wouldn't get rid of this one if you paid me, even though I can't touch the cover of it because it makes me want to puke. This one is Electric. This one I would say is, I don't know, it's odd because it is the easiest time that I ever had with a Melt Cosmetics palette, but it is also like not my favorite Melt Cosmetics palette. It's like I'm a glutton for punishment, and I really want those more difficult, finicky formulas from Melt to make me happy, because this one, as easy as it was to use, was not my favorite palette to use. I don't know if it's color story, I don't know what it is, but I like it. I just don't, I'm not 100% in love with this palette, and if there was one that I was going to declutter, it would be this one. I actually think that this one might be one that I would declutter if I was going to declutter one, because this one I had the least amount of fun with. This is the Bailey Fatally Yours palette, and I love Bailey Siri, and this made me so sad. This is an all matte palette. I will keep it because it's an all matte palette, and it is grungy and beautiful. But I didn't love the colors in here. Like, they all perform so dark. Like, this one looks really, really light in the pan, but it actually performs really, really deep. This one looks like a beautiful, like light acid wash denim in the pan, but it's actually, again, really, really deep. it doesn't have any light tones in here, which made it really hard for me to use. I don't care that it doesn't have shimmers, honestly. I could do a whole matte eye look and be perfectly fine with it. I cared that they were a lot deeper in the pan and didn't perform in the way I wanted them to perform. So this one, if I was going to get rid of one, it would be either Fatally Yours or Electrip. Neither one of these are my favorite, but I'm keeping them. Muerte and Vida, you guys know. Listen, this was a journey. I've mentioned this journey every single one of the videos that I've done with these palettes in them. So I won't mention the journey again, but it was a true journey to get these palettes. So I won't be decluttering these palettes. And I love that they are the yin and yang of each other. Like one's really light and airy and one's really deep, dark and moody. And I love that they just paint a beautiful picture of a sugar skull when they're placed together. They're just so pretty. And this was when I first noticed melt, was with this collection. I have Gemini 1 and Gemini 2. So Gemini 1 is more on the green brown, like neutral kind of tone baseline, and Gemini 2 is greens and pinks and reds. Love them both. They work well together. They're just so stunning. I didn't get Gemini until Gemini 2 came out. I was really late to the game for that palette, which is shocking because that is a green palette and green's my favorite color. And then I have Christmas Town and Halloween Town. These were their Halloween collection this last year, right? This last year. And these are them. Again, they have that cover that moves, but only this section is that cover, so this section is not, so it's not nearly as hard to hold on to. This is Halloween Town, the Oogie Boogie palette, which is gorgeous, beautiful, love it. Probably not my favorite of the two. This one I purchased because Melt did a sturdy. You guys have all heard that story. I purchased this one. A week later, they came out with the Christmas Town collection. My friend purchased this one for me. This is the Jack palette, and this one I think has a color story that's more up my alley, so I'm really happy to have it in my collection. And if Angela had not purchased it for me, I would have purchased it for myself. I'm gonna go grab a different section of palettes. I will be right back. I have Lunar Beauty, Too Faced, my one Lorac and one KVD palette. We have Urban Decay and ABH. Let's start here. Lorac. You know, truly, this is the Lorac Pro palette. It's the only Lorac palette I still have in my collection. And I honestly don't think that there is any reason to get rid of this palette. It has wonderful mattes. I don't really 100% love Lorac shimmers. I feel like they're more of a satin than they are a shimmer, so they're not super impactful, but they are beautiful. They lay on the eye well. They're thin enough that they don't exacerbate texture. This is probably my favorite white in my palette collection overall, so I'm gonna hold on to this palette. And then the KVD Saint and Sinner palette, I think we would be hard pressed for me to get rid of this palette, mostly because this is the first like high-end palette that I ever purchased for myself. And this was a $62 eyeshadow palette at the time that I was like, there is no way I can spend $62 on an eyeshadow palette, and then ended up, for whatever reason or however I did it, purchasing it. I love that this has a really light, like ethereal side and a really deep, like grungy side. And I love pulling this out during Halloween time frame. For whatever reason, it's not a Halloween palette, but it reminds me of Halloween. And I think that these pans might be magnetic, so I can actually pull them out of here as well. There are some really, really beautiful shadows in this palette, and there are some duds as well. It's not my favorite eyeshadow palette, but because of the sentimentality behind it, and I mean just truly the beauty of the palette, I will hold on to it as well. Too Faced is not my favorite brand. I think that we can tell that it's not my favorite brand. I don't have much from them in terms of eyeshadows. I really do not like their eyeshadows. But the 4 palettes that I have here are the 4 palettes that I like from Too Faced. I think if I got rid of one, it would probably be the most recent one. But I think it's just because it's kind of a hem-ha palette. There's nothing like spectacular about the color story. So, I mean, that one I would get rid of. I really do not mind it though. Like, I came up with some really beautiful eye looks out of this palette. The one shadow that I would change if I could do anything in this palette would be this one. I would put like just a totally different color. Like, we don't need that green in this palette, and I think that they did it just to have a pop of color in here. And this shadow here was one of my favorites to use, but probably one of the most fickle in the palette. The other one was this red right here. Again, another one of my favorites to use, but probably one of the more fickle in this palette. So, I mean, there are reasons why I could get rid of this and not like think twice about it, not bat an eye. But for now, it will stay. I don't know what that means for it long term in my collection. This is the Italian Spritz. Smells beautiful, very fruity. This one smells like apples. I don't necessarily need this palette either, but I'm going to hold on to it. I don't love this blue shade here. I also don't love this one here, but this is a decent palette in terms of like the color story and the formula in here. But one thing that I just noticed is you see these two colors right here. Look at that. They're like literally the same. That's interesting. My Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. This will likely not go anywhere anytime soon. This was one of the first full collections that I ever bought after starting YouTube. I love this palette so dang much. I don't know why. I don't know why I loved this palette so dang much. I don't know why I needed to have it, but I do love that it goes from really, really light and has some really, really deep tones in here, and it's like an eyeshadow palette that you could wear every day if you wanted to. And it still smells like peaches. Granted, it's a dull peach scent left in there, but it is still a beautiful peach scent, so I will hold on to that one as well. And then this one is my Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette. This is so old in my collection and probably has seen better days and should go. But these still perform. I mean, I'm not going to swatch everything, but these still perform. Look at that. Like, and it took nothing for me to stick my finger in there and get payoff. They still perform so dang well. So I can't see myself getting rid of this palette until it no longer performs in that way. So I will hold on to it. At one point in time, these were some of the best shimmers that I had in my collection. That's crazy because they're not all that fantastic, right? But look, that one little swatch just goes, like, eyeshadows were just made differently back then. Urban Decay. I keep holding on to this palette because it is the sister palette of the Urban Decay Electric, which is like one of the first palettes that I ever had with the crazy color story like this. A lot of these colors can be found in the Urban Decay Electric palette, but I have put the Urban Decay Electric palette in my memories drawer because I won't be using that on my eyes ever again. It is just so old, even though it performs so well. I mean, and it didn't cause any problems with my eyes either. I just think that I'm afraid of like an eye infection or a sty or something like that. So I keep this because it's newer and it has that same color feel. I do love these colors. I will hold on to this palette for that reason. The Moon Dust shadows are like, listen, top notch. We all know about Urban Decay Moon Dust shadows, and this is before they offered them in like singles. I will be holding on to this. This is a beautiful palette for just like toppers. It's all shimmer. I love pairing these two palettes together because this is not got anything like spectacular in it, whereas the Moon Dust shadows are pretty spectacular. My Born to Run palette, I think I want to do something with this, like a pan that palette in order or something like that, because this is a really old palette in my collection. It's a really beautiful palette, but I just don't do palette panning. But with my No By Year, maybe I'll be interested in doing palette panning. I don't know. It's an older palette. It's a beautiful palette. There's like a dud in here. This shadow here is not spectacular, but the rest of them are really, really nice. It still performs well. I will hold on to this palette. This one, y'all, I love the packaging of this palette. Like, how beautiful is this packaging? But I hate the palette. I mean, I could be tempted to declutter it because I'm just holding on to it for the packaging. I'm going to put this in a maybe pile for now. I don't like the Naked formula. I never have. Maybe I'll give it to my daughter so it still stays in the house. I don't know. Maybe I'll take all the pans of eyeshadow out of it and declutter those and then just keep the packaging for display. I don't know. Lunar Beauty. None of these are going anywhere, even though some of them are not my favorite. I just did a palette ranking on this. I'm going to start a palette ranking series on my channel, which you might not see. Well, I think you might see it right before you see this, because I feel like it's time. I haven't done a palette ranking like by brand ever on my channel. Moonspell is not going anywhere. Probably, I think this one came in at number 1 in that palette ranking. I love this palette so much. My only regret in life, just kidding, God, that's so dramatic, but I really want the second one of the Moonspell palettes. Eternal Eclipse is not my favorite. I think it's just because it's like dark and moody color story. It's more cool tone than it is anything else, and I'm just not a cool tone bee, but I do really like the blues in this palette when I elect to use a blue. I hate this shadow, but other than that, like, they're all really pretty, and the mattes in here are fantastic. Lunar Beauty does have a really beautiful formula, so we'll hold on to that. Life's a Drag. It's an end of an era. I'm gonna declutter this palette. What? It will likely go into my memory drawer though, because it's too old to give away at this point, and it really is just kind of not the best as far as formula goes. Like, this was Manny's first palette. I am going to declutter this one, mostly because I can pull those shades that I like the most out of that palette out of any of the other palettes that I have in my collection, but also, like, it's just, it needs to go. Nude Prism is my newest one. I did pick this up at JCPenney's in their beauty section, which was a shocker among all shockers that JCPenney had Lunar Beauty in it, but I do love this palette. I do think that there's a little bit of redundancy in the row of shimmers here, but I love that it's got like pinky tones and brown tones. I do like that it is from really light to really deep, and I really like this palette. It's a good, nice staple palette to have in your collection, and the shimmers in here are stunning. I think if there was a secondary one that I was going to declutter, it might be this one because of all of the other palettes that I have. This is Greek Goddess, by the way. This is also not my favorite palette. This was, you know, really early on in Manny's like experience as a brand owner. I think it's beautiful, and it's got some really beautiful like neutral basic tones, but it is getting older in my collection. It's just not his best formula as far as I'm concerned. Should I get rid of this one too? I'm literally never pulling for this palette. I can't let go of it quite yet. We'll see how we feel about it next year. Then I have Strawberry Dream, which is, I think, my number 2 palette in the ranking. I think the only reason why this comes in at number 2 is because this is a little bit less user-friendly than Moonspell in terms of just how bright and colorful this is. Like, this is just totally beautiful. And there isn't an eye look that I have done out of this palette that I absolutely hated. So, love this palette. This one is not going anywhere. You know, I keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with this palette. This will go in a stack with the Robin Eisenberg palette, and we'll see where we're at. These are my ABH palettes. These are the Norvina Collection Big Palette. None of these will likely go anywhere. ABH is another one of my favorite formulas. Now, these, you know, Norvina Collection palettes aren't necessarily the best quality. They're all pressed pigments. They're all very fickle to use, right? And cause a lot of like havoc and discontent with eyeshadow looks that you're doing. But I truly do love pulling for these palettes for any color that I might need. And this is my go-to fall palette. This is volume 3. This one is volume 1, and it is purple. I have better purples in my collection, and I really don't love these 2 bottom rows of mostly like primary colors. I wish the whole palette was purple, and I do know that she came out with one that is a whole palette of purples, but it is what it is. I will keep this. And then this is volume 2, which is all of the blues and greens and beautiful blues and greens at that. I have actually pulled for this palette several times this year, well, 2024 alone. So like these do get some use, so it doesn't make any sense to get rid of them. That is volume 1, 2, and 3 of the Norvina collection. Those sit in a separate like section in my palette collection like spreadsheet as well. Like they have their own like Norvina collection section. These are all of the ABH palettes that I have left. Did declutter a couple last year. So I have Modern Ren, Carly Bible, Cosmos, Sultry, Norvina. This one is Nouveau, Soft Glam, Rose Metals, Alyssa Edward, Jackie Aina, and Subculture. And I will be keeping all of Jackie Aina. Subculture, listen, I never had the problems with Subculture that everybody else did. I love this palette. Alyssa Edwards, Soft Glam. I don't 100% understand the hype on this guy, but it is a beautiful, like, neutral everyday palette. Sultry, beautiful, like, cool tone with a pop of coral. Norvina, not as purple as it was boasted to be. Carly Bible, actually prettier than I thought it was when I first got it. My two favorite shades are these two right here, which are Jode and OA. Modern Ren, which is so old in my collection, used and abused, but looks really good and still performs really well. And then the three newest ones are Cosmos, which is, I mean, come on, that is so pretty. Nouveau. Oh, my spine is broken on this guy. That's very sad. And Rose Metals. And this one is the one I like the least. So if I was going to declutter any of them, it would be this one, but I think I'm going to hold on to it for now. I thought about it. I'm going to declutter this one. Just going through these, like I saw so many of these shades in those palettes. It is truly an end of the era, when I am decluttering my Lunar Beauty palettes. I'm going to declutter this one. As sad as that makes me, because I really love the packaging, I'm not going to hold on to a palette for the packaging. I am going to see if my daughter wants it, like I do with all of my palettes. But there's that. Alright, I am going to go pull some more palettes. I will be right back. Most of these are one-offs and two-offs, and most of these are also indie, like really indie, like can't get them mainstream. So I'm going to start with these two because I just did palette roulettes on these two, and I will be keeping them. Cosmic Beauty is new to me this last year, and I quickly fell in love with them. This is their Winter Wonderland palette, which is beautiful and a keeper. And this one is Muse. I just recently did the palette review on this one. Oh god, such a beautiful, beautiful grungy, but also like surprisingly everyday palette. These are my Inslee Rain palettes. I have Lands of Enchantment and Cold Moon. I won't be getting rid of these either. These are very, very expensive, but also very, very unique and beautiful palettes to my collection. And I know all the things. I already sunk my money in before all the things, so I will be keeping these palettes as well. Lands of Enchantment is my favorite so far. And I have one more Inslee Rain palette in my drawer of shame. Truly beautiful palettes. BH Cosmetics. These are the only two that I have left. I have Avocado Toast, which I quite like this palette. It's just a green eyeshadow palette. And then Weekend Festival. This I got in BoxyCharm, and there's not really anything spectacular about it, and I know that I'll pull for other palettes before I pull for this one. I think I'm gonna declutter this. I just had this in my repurchase or nah, and I think this was a nah palette for me, so that just tells me I need to get rid of it. So Avocado Toast is the only one I'm keeping. These are my Sigma palettes. I will be keeping both of these. This one is Untamed. It reminds me of kind of a better version of the Subculture palette. I love Subculture, don't get me wrong, but this one is a little bit more wearable and a lot better as far as blendability goes. So I will hold on to this. And it also brings back some really great core memories for me. In my early days of YouTube, my friend Anna and I got this palette around the same time and did a collab together on it. I love that palette. And then this one is the Enchanted palette, which also is just a truly beautiful palette. Not as wonderful as I thought it was going to be because, you know, Kelly Gooch, this is one of her favorite palettes. I didn't think it was all that spectacular. I don't 100% understand her hype on it, but I do think that it's a beautiful palette, so I will hold on to that. The Patrick Star One Size palette, I think I can let go of this palette. It was one of those palettes that I was just like, I mean, it's a beautiful palette. It's a beautiful, like, just staple everyday palette. These two shadows were duds for me, which was whatever. I think I have these shades over and over and over again in my collection, and I don't 100% need this. There's nothing that stands out to me in this palette that makes me want to keep it. So I do think that I am going to declutter this palette. Okay, Beauty Bay New Romantic. I love this palette. Quickly became one of my favorites in my collection. It reminded me, I think I posted it as the really affordable version of the Modern Renaissance palette, and I love the formula. Beauty Bay really does have a great formula. It makes me want to pick up more from them. I just haven't at this point for no reason why. I mean, truly love this palette. We'll hold on to it. Be Perfect Carnival. Listen, this is in here because, I mean, just the sheer magnitude of eye looks that I can get out of this palette. I will hold on to this probably forever. It's not a horrible formula either. I think that they do really well in their formulas. Makes me want to pick up more from Be Perfect, but honestly, these palettes are just so big. I hardly ever pull for big palettes like this, but I do love that this has so many shades in it and is actually relatively compact, right? There's like 40 eyeshadows in here, and it's not as big as a house. So I will hold on to that. Okay, Nomad. I have Berlin Untergrund and Cartagena Mágica. I do not love the Nomad formula, specifically when it comes to this palette. I don't love this palette, so this one is going to go. This one I think I'm going to keep for a little bit. I do love this palette, loved every eye look I got out of this palette, and these, I don't know, the formula on these shadows felt different than the formula on the Berlin Untergrund, so I will keep this one, but get rid of the other one. Okay, Ace Beauté. This one will stay because this is the Flare palette. I really do like this palette. I love the color story of this palette. It's a perfect, proper, like fall tone eyeshadow palette with kind of honestly a pop of like summertime to it, right? So it's like early fall. This one I think will go. I just have better purple palettes and I never pull for this one. This one was also honestly the hardest one for me to utilize in my palette roulette series. It just doesn't have the best formula, if I'm honest. But I do love the Blossom Passion palette. This one, sorry, was the Passion Fallen or Paradise Fallen palette. This one is the Blossom Passion palette, and I really do love the color story of this one and had a really good time with this palette, so this one will hang out. And then the Classical Paradise is just truly the epitome of fall as well, so I will hold on to this one as well. Didn't have any hard time with this one. It reminds me of apples, so I will hold on to those three, and I will be decluttering this one. There are some in here that I have an affinity for, but I just think overall the shimmers in this one felt really thick and heavy on the eyes. It exacerbated texture a bit, and none of these was super blendable, so I am gonna declutter this one. And these are the old formula, so before they reformulated, so there's that might be why. they just didn't work out so hot. These are my Dominique Cosmetics palettes, and I have gotten rid of every single one of my Dominique Cosmetics palettes except for these two, and I will likely hold on to these two. This is Celestial Storm. Really beautiful, like, jewel tone color story. I love the pan size in these palettes. I really like the formulation of the mattes in these palettes. The shimmers are not my favorite, but I can deal with them. They're really pretty, so I'll hold on to that one. And then this one is Berries and Cream, which was the first one. This one I actually got in a BoxyCharm. This one I actually purchased. I love taking this one like with me on the road or such because it has a variety of shades but can also be used as like a contour and a bronzer. There's multiple different blushes in here, a highlight. It's a full face palette as well as an eyeshadow palette. So really like taking these on the road with me because their pan sizes are so big and I can use them as an all over palette. And then these are my Unearthly palettes that I have so far. I still have, I think, 2 in my drawer of shame. I think I picked up 6 when I picked up from them. This is Lore, and Lore is so pretty, not going anywhere. This is Unearthly Not Normal, which I'm very sad about because I wish I had waited just a second to pick this up, because right after I picked this up, they discontinued this one and came out with an 18-pan version. I will likely declutter this and pick up the 18-pan version at some point in time, but for now it will stay in my collection. It's not necessarily my favorite palette from them. The color story is just a little bit, makes you think real hard, which is fine, but I do love the palette in and of itself. Don't Be Jelly is my most recent reviewed palette by them. Oh god, this palette is just so pretty. Such a beautiful color story, such a beautiful palette. I had a really great time with this palette. I used it in conjunction with Muse from Cosmic Beauty, and then Dreamer. This also such a beautiful palette. Like, I think that their mattes are spot on and their shimmers are just stunning, like out of this world stunning. Let me pull some more palettes. I'll be right back. I have Glamlight, Morphe, Kaleidos, Juvia's Place, Adept, Tarte, Odin's Eye. And this is it besides my Natasha collection and my drawer of shame. I don't have a whole lot from Morphe, but what I do have from Morphe, I like. So this is the Such a Gem palette. It is a purple palette. And this is part of the reason why I'm okay getting rid of this purple palette, because I will pull for this purple over this purple every single day. Now there's probably purples that I have that I will pull over this one every single day, but this is actually a truly beautiful purple eyeshadow palette with the pinks in there that I love so much. I love these shadows through here. They function much like a Super Shock does. This is a pressed glitter. I hate that shadow. I will never use that shadow and should just dig it out. I will hold on to this Such a Gem eyeshadow palette by Morphe. And as much as I hate to say it, I will also likely hold on to this one because this truly just does have every shade of the rainbow. Like, I don't care that it has his name on the front. I will take his name off the front. I will paint the front of the palette. Maybe we should do that on camera. I have paint pens. That would be fun. That would be fun. But this is, it's a staple in my collection. I pull it when I need different colors from the primary category that I don't really have in other palettes. This, we should paint this. That would be fun. Let me know if you want that. Boss Mood. While I wouldn't probably repurchase this because I don't love giant palettes, I do love this palette. The grunginess of this palette, the greens in here are spectacular. The reds, the oranges, the purples, is just truly a beautiful palette. So I got it as a gift. I will hold on to it. This is the Jaclyn Hill palette, the first rendition of it. Truly iconic. You can see it looks completely untouched. It's not. I promise you, I've used it. I'll hold on to it. I have these colors over and over and over again in my palette collection, but for whatever reason, can't let go of this palette. And then this one really actually surprises me that I like it as much as I do. I got this one in gratis. I actually quite love this section of the palette, which is the surprise. You'd think that I liked this section more. I really do like these 3 rows, these maybe even 4 rows, a lot better than those last 3. But I really do like this palette. This is the Desert Bouquet palette, and I will be holding on to it too. I don't think that Morphe is a spectacular brand. As a matter of fact, I never side-eye Morphe, but those palettes came into my life and I really do like them. So I'm going to hold on to them. These are my Tarte palettes. This is the Tarte Maneater. I went back and forth last year on whether to declutter this or not. But, you know, I have a friend that I would give this to when I do decide to declutter it. She's already, like, put her name on the palette. I have used it quite a few times this last year, and I don't think that this is the same beautiful Tarte formula that we're used to, but I do think that it has its wins. So, for now, I will hold on to it. These two, the Tarte Remix palette and the Tarte Pro palette, I think I'm going to get rid of this palette. I don't love this palette. I bought it because it, you know, this was one of the first Tarte palettes that I ever owned. This is its like sister, but I don't love it. It's mostly shimmers. I never pull for it. I don't like the packaging. It's one of those, like, again, movable packagings that I have a hard time touching. It makes me want to throw up. So I'm just going to declutter that one and keep this one, which is the older one and honestly the most usable of the palettes. And then I have the Tartelette in Bloom, which I got in gratis, I think last year at Field Leadership Conference, and I actually love it so much. So I'll hold on to that. These are the 2 Adept palettes that I have. I have the Plain Jane. I do believe this is the remastered version. It doesn't say remastered though, so I kind of wonder. I go back and forth on whether it is. Such a beautiful palette. It's an all shimmer palette. I love Adept Cosmetics palettes. They are so beautiful, so expensive, but again, better than Pat McGrath, so buy them. This one is the Ninhydrin palette. This one does have 2 mattes in it, and I love the mattes in this palette. The shimmers in this palette are multi-chromes and just so pretty and flaky and beautiful, impactful. I could not even imagine not having these in my collection. Even though this one bothered my eyes a little bit, I will still keep them around. My 2 Kaleidos palettes will stay. The Escape Pod was my favorite palette of the year, I think in 2022. Love this palette. Club Nebula, also just such a beautiful eyeshadow palette, whereas this one is like light and airy in summer. This one is deep and moody and reminds me of like winter. And this one was an Angelica Nyquist collab. So my Oden's Eye palettes, they're all collabs. This one was my favorite palette of 2023, the Flora Story palette. I will be keeping all of these, just saying, but beautiful color story in this palette. Color lovers neutral, a neutral lovers color. That's how I like really think about that palette. This one is Planet Spirit. It's not my favorite of them just because of the color story, really, because it's a little more difficult to wear. But Betty Jean did such a good job with this palette, and it is truly just a really beautiful palette. And Oden's Eye's formula, when they did these palettes, are just so good. Sea Talk. This one is Lauren May Beauty collab. This is the whole catalyst behind me picking up that Perfect World collection because I love Lauren, so I wanted to support in that way. Love this palette, actually. She did a really good job with the color story in this one as well. And then we have Angelica's Trick or Treat and Little Ghost palette from last Halloween. This is Little Ghost, which I think is, I mean, a really pretty palette. This one I thought was going to be my favorite just because of the color story in it, and it wasn't, but it's still a really beautiful palette. I love the artwork on it as well. This one is the Trick or Treat, and this one was my favorite, even though I struggled with this green. That green did me dirty so many times, but it's such a beautiful palette. So I will be holding on to both of those as well. Glamlight. Glamlight Chucky palette, Crazy in Love, one of my favorite palettes of the year. I will hold on to this palette. It reminds me of Pretty Grunge, only more red in tone than pink in tone. Really pretty. Love this palette. One of my favorite palettes of the year it came out. Michaela Pot 2. I actually quite love this palette. Michaela pot one, I am not wholeheartedly a mega fan of, but I will hold on to it because I'm going to hold on to the Michaela palette, and there's some sick and twisted like piece of me that's like, I can't have one without the other. The cake palette I do love. I will hold on to this palette. It's just so bright and vivid and beautiful, and I think performs really, really well. These guys are what drew me to Glamlight, but I really do think I'm going to keep this one, which is the Paint Pro, I do believe. Yeah, and it's got like all those tertiary colors to it. It's just so pretty. I do think that I'm going to get rid of this one. And my daughter, my youngest daughter, is an artist, and I do think that she will love this palette. So I think that I'm going to give her that. This is just more of the like primary colors, and I didn't wholeheartedly love this palette as much as I loved the little ones. So I'm going to give her this palette. These are all of my Juvia's Place palettes, and I'm not 100% sure how many of these are gonna go, but oh, Stone Cold Fox by ColourPop. We will be holding on to this guy because it's a beautiful cool tone palette, and these are removable pans, and I really like this palette, and it is a total damn disaster. I don't know how that happened. I got rid of so many different Juvia's Place palettes, and I've only held on to the ones that I love. However, this one I would get rid of if it weren't for the sentimentality to it. This is the Masquerade palette. My daughter bought me this palette for Christmas one year, so I hang on to it because my daughter bought it. But honestly, it's mostly shimmers. It's really deep. I have a hard time with this one because the shimmers are also pretty thick. If my daughter had not purchased this, I probably would be getting rid of this palette, decluttering this. I think I'm going to declutter it anyway. I don't think my daughter will care. I'm going to declutter this palette. Walhalla 2, I really, really love for the color story on it, but there's like 3 different shadows in here that I won't wear because they're pressed glitters. But it is such a really beautiful, bright jewel tone color story with pops of like normalcy to it. I need to dig out these glitters because I won't use the glitters, and that will actually help me to like utilize this palette more, but I do think I want to hold on to this one. Tribe and Nomad are 2 of my favorites. So this one is Tribe, which is a beautiful green color story, and this one is Nomad, really decently fall toned. I really also love the Deuce, which looks like this. Zulu is really interesting and unique to my collection, so I'll hold on to that. The Saharan 2 Festival Magic Mini. Magic Mini I'm going to hold on to because it does have some really interesting like shadows in it. Like I think this one's interesting. This one's pretty interesting. Actually, it's also mostly, I think I'm going to get rid of this one as well. So this one will go as well. I'm going to hold on to these 2, Saharan 2 and Festival. Let me get you an up close. This is Festival. I do think it's got some like pretty unique shadows to it. This one is Saharan 2. Garden of Juvia's, which is all pastel, and you would think that I was going to get rid of it. In fact, when I pulled it out, I was like, oh, that one can go. I really do like utilizing this palette. The shimmers in this palette are just truly stunning. And this is a really, really good Juvia's Place formula. The shimmers are so much thinner than they are in the regular palettes and easier to use on the eyes. They don't exacerbate texture. You don't have to be super careful with them. So I do love this palette, and it will also stay. We're doing actually quite a bit better than I thought we would be doing. I'm going to go grab my Natasha Denona and my Drawer of Shame palettes. I will be right back. These were sitting up in my in use, and I forgot about these. This is the Too Faced Born This Way Natural Nudes palette. This is in my deck of panning right now. I love this palette. It's not going anywhere. And this is in my deck of panning as well. It is a Becca palette. It also isn't going anywhere because I surprisingly have fallen in love with this palette since it's been in my deck of panning. This palette, obviously you can't get anymore, but it is the Pearl Glow Shimmering Eye palette. Really beautiful palette. These palettes right here are all of my Natasha Denona collection that are my big palettes, so minus the minis that are in the other drawer. And these are all in my drawer of shame. So none of these are gonna go, so I just thought I'd walk through them with you. These are the remaining minis that I have from Natasha Denona in my drawer of shame. I haven't used these yet. I have the mini My Dream, the mini Nude, and the mini Glam palette. These three are the palettes that I have left from Cosmic Beauty that I haven't tried. This is the Serenity palette. Then we have Cool Trolls. I'm so excited to try these palettes. I've just really fallen in love with Cosmic Beauty, Cosmic Brushes, whatever you call it. And then this one, and this one has recently been pulled into my palette roulette. This one I am going to be testing soon. These are the two palettes that I have in my drawer of shame from Danessa Myricks. I have Defining Neutrals, her like brown groundwork palette to go with the Blooming Romance palette. There's a lot of bloom on this palette. I haven't even tried it, but look at how bloomy that is. I need to dig this out. And then this is her Lightwork Freedom palette, which I think I did a whole unboxing on. I will link that up in the cards for you guys because it's just, it's super delicate and it's like really wrapped and really wrapped again and really wrapped again, so it's hard to show it. I do think that my next like palette roulette, I need to pull these two in. This is what I have left from Unearthly. I have the Devour and the Dead of Night. Devour is in my palette roulette with the Undergrowth palette right now. So I am currently in review process with that palette. And then Dead of Night is a beautiful purple jewel tone leaning. It reminds me of Blim Bunny Lore a lot. Ooh, maybe I should do a battle of the palettes with those two, but I haven't even tried that yet. I have the Natasha Denona I Need a Worm and Natasha Denona Golden that I purchased that I haven't even used yet. So this is the I Need a Worm, and this is Golden. Now I got Golden also in my Beautylish Lucky Bag this year, so I do have an extra spare of this palette that I will be putting into a giveaway or giving as a gift. I'm not sure yet at this point. And then this is my last Inslee Rain palette that I have not used yet. This is the Groovy Garden palette, and I love the color story of this palette. It's just so pretty. My back is killing me. Too old to be sitting on the floor these days. This is my Mammoth Natasha Denona collection. I have every MIDI and almost every full-size palette that she's ever done. I do know that there's a couple that I'm missing, like I'm missing Tropics, and I think there's one more big one that I'm missing, but otherwise I have all of them. She's somebody that I collect, so whether I need the palette or not, I'm going to be picking it up. This is the Hypernatural Face Palette. Not my favorite. Didn't love this palette, but it has 5 eyeshadows in it, so I keep it in the eyeshadow place, otherwise I forget about it. This is the Glam Face Palette. I actually quite like this one of the face palettes. It's really pretty. I love the blush and the highlight that are in here as well. Really beautiful, just everyday eye looks you can get from this palette. Love it. And then this one is the Love Face Palette. This one I'm not 100% in love with, but I also think it is pretty as well. And I have Roxa, and I do have palette reviews on every single one of these, so I will as I said earlier, link my palette roulette series in the cards. This is My Dream. I have Love, Retro, one of my favorites, Pastel, one of my least favorites, Sunrise, Yucca, also one of my favorites, Zendo, Glam. This is one I wasn't even going to pick up. I'm glad I did. I like this palette a lot. Bronze. Shockingly, this is not one of my favorites. I really like this color story. I really like the corals and oranges on my eyes. Did not love that one. Retro Glam. Again, not my favorite. I like the Sydney Grace version of this better. I Need a Nude. And this one's grown on me. When I first did the review on it, I didn't love it. Midi Xenon. I really actually quite like this palette. I know that it's like, you know, on the beauty space. It's really polarizing, but I really like it. This one is Metropolis. This is the Star palette, one of my favorites. This is the green brown, purple blue, sunset, lila, trio chrome. My love of my life bought this for me for Christmas one year. Circle Loco, not one of my favorites. Mostly shimmers in this palette, which is shocking. Natasha Denona Gold. She just needed to remake this palette in a midi size. She didn't need us to give us the golden palette. Most of what's in golden I think there's 9 overlapping shades, but these ones are better. They're so much better. And then Biba. So I think I'm missing Tropics, and there's another one that's this, you know, $129 version. I think there are 2 in this size that I'm missing. But other than that, that is my Natasha Denona collection and my drawer of shame. We had 15 palettes to start. And listen, I knew that we weren't going to be getting rid of a ton of palettes, but I think I've actually kind of shocked myself here because we're getting rid of a lot more than I thought we were. We're getting rid of 17, so I'm back down under 200 palettes, which is shocking to me. The reason why I think this is so shocking to me is because, you guys, I declutter palettes all throughout the year. So if I use them in palette roulette and I don't like them, and I know that I'm just not going to use them, I declutter them. I decluttered 27 palettes in 2024. And here we are in my palette collection of 2025, and I'm decluttering another 17 palettes. So I'm actually pretty shocked because that means that overall we've decluttered in 2024 44 palettes. So, I mean, that's crazy sauce to me. So this puts me back under 200 palettes, which is a really good place for me to be. I know that I have a lot of palettes, and I know that that might seem outlandish or absurd to a lot of people. Sometimes it feels outlandish and absurd to me, but I'm never going to be a person who has a minimal palette collection. That's just not going to happen. So we are decluttering all of these. They will likely go to a good home. I might put this one in my memory drawer because my daughter did buy it for me. It's one of the first ones that she bought for me. This one doesn't need to go to another home. This one I have only used through my palette roulette series. This one I've only used through my palette roulette series. These 2 I've only used through my palette roulette series. Like, I am pretty, looking at these palettes, I can tell you I likely would never have picked them up again, and they needed to go from my collection. So that's it. That's all I have for you. I hope that you guys enjoyed the videos. For all of my collection and declutter videos, I have to tell you, I did have an intro and an outro for my collection videos, but it was corrupted and I didn't feel like recording it again. So I'm sorry if that, you know, makes you angry, but I feel like just jumping into the videos was super fun to do. It was super fun to edit. So there's that. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this journey of collection and declutter this year. I hope that you enjoyed it. And again, I'm on a no buy this year. So I don't know how much of my collection is going to see some use through 2025, but I do think it'll be more than we've seen in the past. I'm trying to utilize my project pan and my deck of panning as a way to rotate through my collection. I'm going to be using my Shop My Stash from a very different perspective in this coming year, and there are 17 palettes here, which is a lot more than I thought we were going to declutter, because I did declutter 27 palettes throughout the year of 2024. So that said, again, thank you guys so much. I hope that you guys are all doing well, that you are all healthy and safe and getting along as best that you can. I hope that you're loving each other, being kind humans, and living your best life. And until next time, bye friends.